Welcome to another edition of the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. My name is Paul Delegro, your host, and my guest today is Sean Olsen. He is with Olsen Personal Injury Law Firm. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, I got to admit, the first thing I think of when I hear of a personal injury attorney is I think of an ambulance chaser. Please tell me you're not an ambulance chaser.
I sure hope I'm not an ambulance chaser. I've spent a lot of time and effort to make sure that I'm not an ambulance chaser. We're not all ambulance chasers. Yeah, well, they exist, but it's not me.
Yeah, so I'm a sales guy, so I always get the jokes about, you guys sales guys are all alike. You all just go out golfing and happy hours all the time, which is not the truth.
Is that not? That's not true?
No, it is not. I wish it was, but yeah, maybe in my younger years. But these days, I don't do any of that. Well, great to have you, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
Like I said, when I think of personal, everyone needs a personal injury attorney at least some point in my life. I know a couple of years ago, I got blindsided at an intersection, and I had to go through the whole legal process and sue and all that. And I got some money out of the deal. I didn't get famous, but I got something. But it's always a very stressful time when you have an injury and you need a personal injury attorney.
Yeah, I think folks who have not been involved in that system, who haven't had the need for a lawyer, underestimate or sort of have this idea in their head as to what the system is, and jackpot justice, and spilling a Starbucks coffee on my lap and that kind of thing. It's just it's not a reality that bears out.
Yeah.
And so I think, as you've discovered, right? I mean, it just probably wasn't what you expected when it happened.
No. And what's funny, you just mentioned something that just struck a chord with me, is like all these frivolous lawsuits that are out there. Like you said, someone spills a cup of McDonald's coffee in their lap and they get millions. How is that even possible?
Well, I guess, the myth of the frivolous lawsuit, I think 99% of the time is just that. It's a myth. The McDonald's lawsuit, which the insurance company had a field day with, it wasn't at all the way it was portrayed. There's a whole lot of detail in that story that is left out. The fact that McDonald's had this ridiculously hot coffee, they knew it was ridiculously hot, and they decided as a financial decision that they were going to keep making that coffee as hot as it was and just pay out the damages rather than pay the money to replace the coffee machines.
Yeah.
So, that's where those kinds of things come.
Yeah, lesser of two, you got to pick your poison, right?
That's exactly right.
But it was probably cheaper to do the payout than change out all the infrastructure in all their stores.
Right. And, and for them, if you look into that story a little bit more, when that woman first contacted McDonald's, all she wanted was them to pay her medical bills, which were a few $1,000s. Yeah. And when they refused that, she got a lawyer, and it turns out that lawyer was pretty good at what he did. And, the rest of the story.
Yeah. Oh, great. Well, how'd you get into being a lawyer, number one, and how'd you get into personal injury?
So I got into being a lawyer back in the early 2000s. I worked in television for about 10 years before I went to law school. And I'd always promised myself that when it stopped being fun, that I would get out. And it stopped being fun, probably right around 2001, September of 2001. 9/11 caused everything to change.
Sure.
Everything I was working on got canceled. And I thought, you know what, maybe I'm tired of dealing with this. And so I spent a couple of years sort of walking the desert, trying to figure out, what's the next chapter, what's the next thing I'm going to do with my life. And I decided on law school, decided on being a lawyer. It was an opportunity to continue telling stories, but instead of sitting on the sidelines, I'd actually get to advocate for people and, hopefully make a difference in lives.
Yeah. So was there an event that made you do that? Like someone close to you got in an accident and they needed help and you were frustrated? Or what was the genesis of going to law school?
So, well, really the genesis of going to law school, I don't know if I really anticipated being a personal injury lawyer when I did that. I had some ideas as to what I wanted to do. And even when I got out of law school, I didn't start doing personal injury work. I represented cops and firefighters and EMTs for about 10 years. And it wasn't until 2016 I was invited to be trial counsel on a case for a young lady who was horribly injured in a drunk driving crash. And I took that opportunity. I was helping out a friend, and the stakes in that case were ridiculously high. This woman was, forever bound to a bed or a wheelchair. And the outcome of that case was ultimately going to determine whether she got to live at home with her parents or whether she'd have to go stay in a state institution, and essentially be institutionalized for the rest of her life. And it was one of the first times in my career I was like, wow, I can really make a difference.
Yeah.
And so I decided after that case was over, I decided that's the kind of work I'm going to do, and made the transition over and been doing it ever since.
Yeah, that's funny that you say that. I respect the fact you said you want to make a difference. Now, we all have to make money. You're not doing it for free, and
Of course.
I get it.
Right.
But I think you get pleasure out of helping people's lives. I think that there's something to be said for that,
No doubt. And I think that, that applies across any business that you go into. You make a difference for somebody, you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
And, doing this, I really feel like I'm making a difference.
Yeah, it's funny. Not to change direction, but I have two daughters. One's a social worker, one's an elementary school teacher, and they certainly didn't get into it for the money. They're impacting lives. They're impacting lives. That's
right. And there's a great deal of value in that, just
100%.
Personal value.
They love what they do. They're very successful at it, and to them, they're successful. They may not be making hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they're successful in their own right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's we all have to do that. We got to figure out what does success mean to us, and
it's all relative, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have to mean becoming a billionaire like Elon Musk. As long as you're happy to get out of bed in the morning and go do what you do, man, you're winning.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you gotta love what you gotta love. At least like a lot what you do every day, because we've all done it, Sean. I mean,
yep.
I've had some jobs where I've been miserable, and I wouldn't want to go through that again. And I made the decision years ago that not going to happen anymore. I'm just going to get up every day. If I don't like what I do, I'm just going to move on or quit or retire or whatever the heck.
You and me both. Yeah, it's not worth it.
It really is.
Here for such a short period of time. You got to make it fun.
So how do you? When you made the switch to personal injury, how do you get the word out there? Like, okay, I'm hanging a shingle. I'm a personal injury attorney. What do you do from a branding and a marketing standpoint to get your name out there, that trustworthy, lawyer out there that everyone goes to?
Yeah, that was a tough thing to do. I mean, that was probably the hardest part of the whole thing. Because, there are these, billboard lawyers and TV lawyers all over the place, spend millions upon millions of dollars every month advertising what they do. I didn't have that. I didn't have anything even ballpark close to that. And so it was really, it was a matter of two things. I think, with social media advertising,
sure,
it was cheap enough that I could engage in that. And the marketing we did really sort of it was geared toward my story and the story of our clients, storytelling marketing, essentially.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of coffees and a lot of lunches and dinners and meeting people and talking to old friends and letting them know what I was going to do. It's that old
fashioned,
not what you know. Yep.
Yep, 100%. It's funny you said the billboard lawyers. I just had to crack up because we got them. I'm in Texas. We got them down here. They're all over the place. This one guy, I don't even know his name. He called a Texas Hammer. And he gets on these TVs and makes these stupid commercials.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to mention the guy's name. He may sue me. But it's comical.
It is. But the thing of it is, those billboards, they work.
Do they really?
That's why those guys spend so much money on them. And we've spent a little bit of money on them up in Wyoming. We practice throughout the Mountain West.
Sure.
And they work. I resisted doing it for so long, and some of our marketing folks, said, "Hey, let's just give it a try." And I really wanted it to fail so that we wouldn't have to talk about it anymore. But it turns out it works. And,
oh God.
I know it.
Big surprise, right?
That's why they do it.
Yeah. You love those ads. Does advertising work? Yeah, see those signs. Well, it just did. Because
right.
you saw
of course.
the sign. Yeah. So
right.
yeah. No, that's funny.
You see enough of them, and it just sticks.
Yeah, it's subliminal, right? You keep seeing these things over time, and they become part of just your everyday life. That you just when you need something, you call.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
So,
Right. And you never know when you're going to need one until that time comes.
but you mentioned, I think you mentioned something to me previously that, how do you, a small firm like yours, compete against the big Goliaths? How do you do that? Because that's got to be a challenge, right? Like the billboard guys, the guys that are on TV, I've gotten billions in settlements, and you're just a,
Right.
solid local attorney.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's no question about that. And so the firms that you see spending those millions upon millions, they're volume firms, right? They survive by taking on 200, $10,000 cases. And I just never wanted to do that. I never wanted to be that. Yeah. And so I never had to compete on that level with those guys. Right. So for us, it was a matter of figuring out, what kind of work do we want to do and who do we want to do that work for? And, we niched it down and, figured out, let's start with this community first and we'll get known here. And then we'll expand that out to another community, and eventually we started, moving to different states and doing the same thing. And so it wasn't so much a matter of, throwing up TV ads all over the place to get everybody under the umbrella. It was, marketing to a particular segment in a particular field of work, and becoming known that way.
Yeah. And what, if you can you mention it, like really who you targeted first or what industry and what type of people you targeted or?
So one of the things that we did, I mean, we started doing medical malpractice work fairly early on, which lot of most lawyers don't want to do because it's hard, it's expensive, it's really difficult to win. Yeah. And so as a result, the competition at that level was very small. Really? There were some lawyers doing it. Yeah. And,
wow, I would have guessed the opposite, Sean. I would have thought, everyone's going to be going after that business, but I never realized how difficult it was.
It is. It's, especially when you compare it to a car accident. A car accident, you're dealing with a couple of insurance companies and someone who ran a red light, and you prove what the injuries are and you're done. With a medical malpractice case, you got to prove that there was negligence. You have to prove that there were injuries. You have to prove the causation between the two. You're spending $100,000 on experts who will talk to you and prove that case for you. And then quite frankly, and then once you get to a jury trial, if you get that far, juries just don't like holding doctors accountable or hospitals accountable.
Really?
And so there's so many things that stand in your way. And I think that might be changing these days.
Sure.
With the corporatization of medicine and that kind of thing. But, we niched down to that and worked on that as sort of one of the things that we would do. And it didn't take long for the clients to come.
Yeah. And so speaking of clients, I mean, the client experience, I mean, is that something you're concerned about? Like wanting the customers to feel a certain way? What are your thoughts on that?
Paul, that is one thing that I obsess over. And it's been my obsession for the last couple of years. We found so many people call us, because they've had a bad experience with another law firm or they're in the middle of a bad experience, because, quite frankly, people don't know the world that we work in. And, generally speaking, when you call a lawyer, it's scary because something bad is happening and it's getting worse. And so you call a lawyer to help make it better. But a lot of us don't realize that, right? I mean, we treat a client as a client as a client. If there's nothing going on, we're not going to bother wasting our time calling them to tell them nothing's going on. And so one of the things we've done as a firm is try to set out to change that. Client communication is central to what we do. Even when there's no need to communicate, we're still communicating. We reach out every single month to our clients, let them know there's nothing going on, find out what's going on in their lives.
Well, you know something? If there's no updates, that's an update.
Yeah, I agree. Most people don't look at it like that.
I'm in sales, Sean, so I completely agree. If the customer's waiting on some deliverables from you and you don't have them yet and time's going by, you can call them and say, we're still working on it. This is what's slowing us down, blah, blah, blah. Now at least you called them, you showed them respect.
And that's the thing, for us, they might be one of, 40 clients that we have, but for them, it's their only case, it's the thing that they're sitting around obsessing about at home, wondering what's going on. How's this going to work out? Yeah. Is it going to work out? We try to recognize that and, bring them into the fold, give them as much information as we possibly can to make them comfortable.
Yeah, and how many employees do you have, Sean?
So we're right up about 20 employees now.
Okay. So I would think that hiring people with the same philosophy as you would be key, I would think.
It is. Yeah. I mean, because we obsess over that customer service part of things, we make sure that everybody we hire shares that same passion, shares that obsession. And it's hard to find.
Yeah.
I mean, and sometimes we get it wrong and we find out that people aren't a good fit, and we part ways, but it's, that's key to our hiring.
Yeah. And, well, you touched on something I was going to bring up. What happens if someone's not a good fit? You just.
Yeah. I think most of the time when that happens, I think it's apparent not only to us, but probably to the person who's not the good fit as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and I think generally, you have a few discussions about it. And if you get to that point of having 2 or 3 discussions about it, I think it becomes clear to everybody. We just find a way to part amicably, hopefully.
No, that's a professional thing to do, but sometimes it always doesn't work as easily as that, as we know.
Not always.
Yeah. So yeah, creating that culture, I would think, you've been doing this a while now. What, 8, 9, 10 years? I mean,
yeah, we're coming up on 10 years. Yeah, we're coming up on 10.
Now, sounds like you've got a good reputation out there. Do you get a lot of word of mouth referrals?
We do, and that kind of thing obviously takes time.
That's what I'm getting to.
Back when we started, there was very little of that going on. Everything was our organic sort of marketing and that kind of thing that was bringing in business. But now that we've got this stable of clients who have come through the firm and understood what we did and, had a great result, we're seeing more and more of that, right? And I feel like we're hitting that tipping point where much more of our work now is coming in through referrals rather than, through an advertisement on Facebook or, some other means. And quite frankly, those are the best clients.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you can, you're a salesman, right? You basically are. You're selling your firm services every day. So you've got to,
100%.
But whenever you get a call from someone that says, "Hey, John Doe told me to give you, I mean, that's priceless, right?
Absolutely. Cost me nothing at this point in time to get that. And, it's a good boost for the ego too.
Yeah. Well, how do you handle, like, say, a customer that person that got in that car accident and is disabled? That case may not settle for 2, 3, 4 years, correct? I mean, what does that customer do from a cash flow standpoint if they got bills to pay and they can't work?
That's tough. For folks like that, the ones who are literally out of work and out of everything, we try to find as many tools as we can to help them with that.
Yeah.
And whether that's, finding a social service program or something else that's, going to allow them to, to live through this period of time that we're doing things. And we're never asking them to pay us along the way. As personal injury lawyers, we work on a contingency fee basis. We put up all the money for the case going forward. So we're never asking them and digging into their pocket, for that. So, it's always our goal to, make sure they can pay for rent and, put a meal on their table every day. Sometimes it's tough, but I think 99.9% of the time we're able to find those resources for them.
Nice. Yeah. What percentage of your cases do you think gets settled out of court?
Oh gosh. I mean, it's high.
I
think nationwide, the statistic is in the upper 90s. And I think our firm probably matches that. Oftentimes we're going to walk up to the eve of trial, and then find a resolution to things. Yeah. But most of the time, that's just the reality of it these days. Yeah. Nobody wants to take that risk, of going to trial.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm thinking about my case from a couple of years ago. That's what my attorney told me. He goes, "We'll settle out of court. I do this crap every day. It's like you said, it's simple. Who's at fault, right? What injuries that were incurred? What do those injuries cost? What's the future look? It was actually simpler than I thought."
Yeah, and with a car accident, it really is. Yeah. And it's when you get into some of the more complicated litigation, there's more questions, more experts, those are the cases that are are more likely to head all the way to a trial, rather than get resolved out of court.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned something about, and I'm not sure exactly where you mentioned this to me before, about buying back your time so you can invest more in the bill. What was that relating to? I'm drawing a blank on this one.
Well, Buy Back Your Time was actually a book that I read by Dan Martell, and it changed the way I approach almost everything I do now. And it's really a matter of finding people who can take over the tasks that I don't want to do or don't like to do, so that I can be freed up, to think about working on the business rather than in the business. Sort of those higher level ideas and execution of those ideas, rather than, worrying about, sending emails out to everybody or taking care of the calendar and spending a half hour trying to find, somebody who find mutual times on a calendar and that kind of thing.
Yeah. For small companies, that's a tricky one. I know our company, I've been with my company 7 years, and I was probably employee number 8. So everyone was wearing a lot of hats, but it's always a tough decision as you grow. You need to help, but people are expensive.
Right. Well, it's scary in that respect. Yeah, because they're expensive, and you're like, holy cow, how am I going to afford this $100,000 salary? Plus another 25 or 30 for benefits or whatever it is. I think some of the best advice I got on that, though, is, when you're thinking about that, someone said, I'm like, it's scary. I don't know if I got the money to hire an EA. And he said, well, you don't have to pay them all at once. Get paid out over 24 periods, throughout the course of a year. And, thinking about it like that, it makes the decision so much easier to handle.
Yeah, no doubt. So, sounds like you like what you do, Sean.
I love what I do. Yeah, I still do. I like getting up in the morning. I like the team that we put together. I like the work that we do. I like helping clients. Yeah, I feel like I'm winning. When I come into the office, I feel like I'm winning.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You just feeling good about your efforts every day. Like I was joking with you about being an ambulance chaser, but I don't know how guys like that could really sleep at night if you're trying to squeeze every little nickel out of people and don't care about the human experience and you don't care about your clients on a personal level.
I agree. I can't imagine it's a fulfilling way to earn a living. But I guess it takes all kinds in this world, I suppose.
To each their own. So where's the future? You're a fairly young guy.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
My kids disagree.
Yeah, no, that's a whole nother story. But so what's the future hold for you? And I did want to ask you this about AI and how that ties to lawyers, because everything can be automated today. Where do you see the future for being a lawyer, and how is AI maybe affecting what you guys do?
So, I think AI, probably like most industries, is going to dramatically change the way law is practiced. Quite frankly, I think there's going to be some fields of law that are, almost put out of business, at least under the models that they work on now. Particularly like contract guys, estate and trust lawyers, things like that.
I was going to say, you took the words right out of my mouth. You can go online and create your own trust right now and create your own LLC and think just for a couple $100.
Right. Yeah. And for something that used to require, a dozen hours of a lawyer's time and cost you thousands of dollars, now it can be done in 5 minutes. With an AI program. And, really the role of the lawyer at that point, I think, is, to review it, make sure it looks okay. That's an hour, as opposed to 12. I suspect the field that we're in, PI world, requiring trial appearances and, being there, being a human in person is probably going to protect us for a while. But we're going to change as well. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We're going to have to become more efficient, better at what we do. I think right now it's difficult to really see how much it's going to change. I mean, just based on how much it's changed just in the last year. It's remarkable. I mean, it's scary, but it's coming.
I work for an IT consulting, so I'm in technology, and I laugh. I mean, we're still trying to figure that out ourselves. Like, how do we use it? How do our customers use it to monetize it and help their business, right? We're trying to do the same with us. So it is still, it's funny. There's different buzzwords over the year. A few years back, it was digital transformation, right? That was the buzz.
Right.
Now, everything is machine learning, AI, how all that affects your business.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest challenges in implementing all these new things is getting everybody to buy in and get on board. Because I think a lot of people are scared of it. They're intimidated by it. They're also scared they're going to be out of a job next month if they get good at using it. There's all these personnel issues that come along with the implementation of this stuff. It's exciting, right? It's going to open up so many avenues for the average Joe like me, to do things that required a 100-person firm before.
Yeah.
It's going to be cool.
Yeah. It can help you scale, I think, compete with the big boys, right?
No doubt. Yeah.
It's funny.
It's just a matter of figuring out how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I was just thinking about some of those sci-fi movies where computers take over the world,
Right. What's the Terminator? What was the name of the computer in that?
I forget, but I know the movie you're talking about.
That one.
Yeah. Hey, is it possible? Who knows? I don't, technology changes so fast. You would hate to see at a point where a computer can go rogue and truly start, sending missiles and taking over the world, right?
Right. I certainly hope that's never the case, which is also why I always write please and thank you to ChatGPT, so that when it does finally take over, it remembers that I was polite.
Yeah, for Alexa, I always thank her when she gives me some advice.
That's a good idea.
Because they're listening to every word you say.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, that was great, Sean. And if someone would want to get in touch with your firm, how would they do that?
Easiest way to do it is just look us up online. Protectingthewest.com is what we go by. The phone numbers are there. My email's on the website, Sean at olsenlawfirm.com. So anytime anybody wants to get in touch, they're welcome to do so. Yeah. Any question they have, we're always happy to take time, even if we're not going to ultimately represent them.
Yeah, and that first phone call is always just a complimentary kind of let's level set, see if we can help you type call, right?
100%. Yeah, we're always happy to take the time to do that.
Awesome. Well, any final words, any thoughts for the audience out there that you want to leave with?
I think, surviving in this time of AI and that kind of thing, it's really just all about providing a personal experience, getting to know your clients, making sure you understand their needs and things like that, and delivering on those kinds of things, not getting wrapped up in focusing too much on AI programming and computers and everything else. Just get to know people, say hi. Yeah, take care of your clients that you got, and they're going to take care of you.
It actually is pretty simple when you really boil it down, right? Just be a good person, help people, and I think it all will fall into place.
100%.
All right. Well, we'll end on that note, Sean. I really enjoyed having you. I'm always interested in having attorneys on with different perspective. I've had a few on over the past few years, so it's always fun.
Well, thanks for having me, Paul. This has been a good time.
Oh, you're welcome. And so that's it for another edition of the Business Brains, the Bottom Line podcast. This is Paul DeLegro signing off. Till next time.